The music world mourns the loss of Kris Kristofferson, one of the most iconic songwriters of the 1960s. Kris was an outlaw. He was a cowboy and a veteran and an Oxford scholar and a movie star. Kris was one of those songwriters who shaped the music industry from the inside out by having the humility and the prudence to step back and allow others to make masterpieces of his compositions. Kris Kristofferson was from a military family. His father desperately wanted him to be in the army just like he and his father had been. But Kris was exceptionally intelligent as a kid and graduated with distinctions from high school, going straight into university where he graduated at the top of his class. From here, he got a scholarship to Oxford University in England, where he studied English literature. It was around this time that he started dabbling in songwriting. After that, it was off to the army, like so many others from the silent generation. He did his service, trained to become a helicopter pilot, and was stationed in Germany. Of course, being an intellectual type, they offered him a job as an instructor of English literature at West Point Military Academy. But Kris had already fallen in love with music, and he thus decided instead to become a songwriter. During this time, Kris married his first wife, Frances, and they had 2 children, but they struggled to keep their heads above water. Imagine being so brilliant and talented and not being able to support your family because all you want to do is be an artist. So he moved his family to Nashville, where he had a better chance of getting his songs out there. And he took whatever jobs he could, and one of them ended up being a janitorial position at Columbia Records. So he's sweeping the floor in the executive room, and he runs into June Carter. They started talking. He gave her a demo tape of his songs to give to Johnny, and she subsequently tossed it in a pile with a bunch of other tapes and forgot about it. At this time, Kris was working 2 jobs, the one in Nashville where he was trying to pitch his songs to music executives any chance he got, but the other was a commute to Lafayette, Louisiana, where he flew helicopters to and from oil fields to drilling rigs. So one day he decided to go rogue and take a helicopter to the home of Johnny Cash, where he landed on his front lawn with the intention of pitching his songs personally. According to Kris, this was all a big waste of time. June and Johnny weren't even there, but that's not the way that Johnny and June tell the story. Perhaps June and Johnny knew that with every successful country star, there has to be a compelling backstory, and sweeping the floor at Columbia just wasn't it. But Johnny would start to tell people that Kris descended the steps of the helicopter with his songs in one hand and a beer in the other, making one hell of a badass rock star entrance. And June said when she saw the helicopter land, she cried out to Johnny, "First they're coming to us on the land, now they're coming down from the skies." Fun story. Anyways, Kris won over June and Johnny pretty quickly, and Johnny specifically wanted to do a cover of Kris's song Sunday Morning Coming Down.
One of the greatest songwriters around these days is a friend of mine named Kris Kristofferson, and he'll be with us on the show in a couple of weeks, but before he comes, I'd like to do one of his songs too. And then I wash my face and comb my hair and stumble down the stairs to meet the day.
He played it live on his show, The Johnny Cash Show, not long after, and it became a pretty massive hit, providing Kris a pathway to becoming a star. By this time, Kris had also had a few other songs being played by country musicians in Nashville, particularly one by the country singer Roger Miller, a song that Kris had written called Me and Bobby McGee. As Kris tells the story, when he was working on his first record for Monument Records, the founder, Fred Foster, asked him to write a song on a sort of assignment based on an idea that he'd had. He told him to write a song called Me and Bobby McGee, inspired by the name of the secretary of another famous country songwriter, Boudleaux Bryant, Barbara McGee. But when Kris heard the name, he thought he heard McGee, and it kind of flowed better anyway. The cleverness of the song, Foster continued, would be the fact that Bobby was actually a woman. So he thought long and hard about the song, and a scene from the Italian director Federico Fellini's film La Strada entered his mind. The premise was that the main character was riding around with a girl who he was starting to find annoying. The character makes the decision to leave the girl by the side of the road, an act which would eventually lead to her untimely death. Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose, Kris thought. And so Kris put it on his first album with a list of other songs that were eventually covered by famous artists. Shortly afterwards, the song was covered by Roger Miller and was a small country hit.
Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose.
Meanwhile, Kris is starting to get more and more into the counterculture scene, meeting some of the era's most compelling individuals. One such individual was a woman who would come to change Kris's life, Janis Joplin. Both from Texas, Kris and Janis hit it off almost immediately, and he spent a few weeks at her home in California in the summer of 1970, where they just ultimately had a really good time together. He convinced her to record a version of Me and Bobby McGee.
Single yesterday to behold Bobby's body next to mine.
which she did, but she kept it secret from him, with what Kris thought was the intention of surprising him later. Unfortunately, Kris didn't hear the song until about a week after Janis's death in October that same year. But within a few months, it would become one of the biggest songs in the world. Janis's version would peak at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts in March 1971.
I didn't hear it until she was gone, and it was very emotional for me. I could just see her saying, "Wait till that son of a bitch hears this."
After this time, throughout the 70s, Kris Kristofferson became more known for his acting than his singing, although he still hung out with the outlaw country singers and would always be a part of their ranks. He worked a lot with Willie Nelson. They eventually added Waylon Jennings and Johnny Cash to their mix to form the Highwaymen, who were one of the first major country supergroups.
Well, other than the fact that it reminds me a lot of the flag waving and choreographed patriotism that we had back in Nazi Germany half a century ago. The fact that we got a one-party system, which is in control of all three branches of our government, lapdog media that's cranking out propaganda for the administration and make a Nazi blush. Other than that, we're doing pretty good.
Through the 1970s, he was married to the singer Rita Coolidge until 1980, and in 1983, he married his wife Lisa Myers, who he would remain married to for the next 41 years. Kris released 21 studio albums in his career. He has 4 Grammy Awards and a whole pile of country music awards, as well as a Golden Globe for Best Actor in 1976's A Star is Born. Kris Kristofferson will be remembered as the rough outlaw cowboy sweetheart with a huge heart and brain and the talent to write some of America's most timeless songs, an old-fashioned icon, and another sweet voice from the not-so-silent generation.